Psalm 23, the one that starts with, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for your rod and your staff, they comfort me." And it ends, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." This psalm, Psalm 23, is perhaps the most familiar piece of scripture in the entire Bible. I'm a Lutheran pastor. I've led many funerals, and I've been to many funerals in my life. And I can't remember a funeral at which this psalm was not read and heard. It's a psalm that provides a lot of comfort, these pastoral images of a shepherding God who walks with us through dark times and even through the valley of the shadow of death. This pastoral image of a God who protects us from our enemies and provides for us, leading us beside still waters and toward green meadows. I was in Israel a couple of years ago, and we were taking a bus from Bethlehem on the West Bank to the Dead Sea. And we were winding our way down this road from Jerusalem toward Jericho. And there's a very steep decline in elevation that takes place during this trip. And also, it's a very hilly country and very much a desert landscape. So very barren. It doesn't seem like much can grow there. And it's all rock and brown sand everywhere you look along these hillsides as you sort of wind your way along the road. I was thankful that our bus pulled over at one place because I was feeling seasick from all of this sort of traveling, serpentine travel around these hills. And we pulled over and we walked over this hillside and we looked down into this deep valley. And at the bottom of the valley, we could see an old monastery and we could see trees in this deep valley. It was dark, but there was green trees and there was water down below. And along the opposite side, on the bank of one of these hills, as we looked across this desert landscape, we noticed some shepherds, two shepherds and some sheep and goats that were walking along this very narrow trail that wound along the outside of a hill opposite from where we were standing. We watched them walk toward what looked to be a small waterfall coming literally out of the side of this desert hill. It was sort of surprising to see this waterfall. It sort of looked like someone had turned on a spigot or a faucet right out of the side of this desert hill, and there was water pouring out, and these shepherds were leading their animals to this source of water for a drink. It was as if the entire Psalm 23 was depicted in front of us live. It was a live action version of Psalm 23. Our tour guide told us that when you look down into this dark valley below, this valley was known as the valley of the shadow of death. That in fact, what we heard in the psalm is actually about a place in which Jewish pilgrims traveled on their way to Jerusalem. They would come across the Jordan and up through this desert landscape, the hilly desert country of the Judean wilderness, a very barren land. They would walk as they could down into this deep valley because it was down below there where they could get shade, rest from the heat of the day, and there was a supply of water. They called it the valley of the shadow of death because of the darkness in that valley. But it was also a place where they could find some safety and a little provision on their long and difficult journey. Jesus would have made this journey as he traveled from the Galilee toward Jerusalem. They would come down east of the city of Jerusalem, and they would travel across the Jordan River and then up through the Judean hill country, the Judean desert land, into the holy city of Jerusalem. It was amazing to realize that this psalm is about a place, an actual place, and that it really is describing a journey, a pilgrim's journey toward this place where they would seek to experience the presence of God in the temple in Jerusalem. And it was something amazing to suggest that God was with them. Like a shepherd leading sheep, God was with those pilgrims as they traveled together toward Jerusalem. God was with them in that dark valley place. God was with them in the desert landscape. Christians call this experience of an encounter with God, a saving encounter with God, the Via Crucis, or the way of the cross. This notion that it is in death, it is in the dark places, it is in struggle and suffering, in pain. It is in those hard places, in dislocation and disruption and disconnection and denial and betrayal and hardship. That's where God shows up. God comes to us in places of suffering, in places of hardship and isolation, in places of scarcity and worry. God comes in the midst of those circumstances to provide a way, to provide shelter, to provide oasis, to provide water, to provide food, to sustain life. This is the biblical promise and experience of God's people, and it is also the hope of faithful people, that in the midst of hardship, whatever it may be, we trust that God will show up in it, that God will be present in it with us, and that God will walk with us through it. It may be that this is a kind of wilderness, desert experience for us and for you. You may be wondering, where is the good in this? Where is God? We dare to suggest that God is indeed with us in the midst of this most difficult time. And we also dare to hope that God's witness, God being with us in this time, means that we have protection and provision. We indeed have abundance and possibility, even in the midst of what may be a dark time and a dark place for us. May you, in whatever valley you find yourself in, whatever wilderness, desert experience you are having right now as a result of the coronavirus and the disruption and dislocation that it causes. May you find in this time an experience of the living God, present to you, providing for you.